Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Fully Supported, and today we're talking about strange failures and explaining why. And this isn't necessarily about strange failures entirely, as much as it's more about strange phenomenon happening when you load up files that you've already worked on or pre-supported maybe in the past, or even when you get your hands on some of the coveted Lychee Slicer scene files that some guys use for pre-supporting. Now, in my case, whenever I work on a pre-support file, I always use a Lychee Slicer scene file to save my work, and I'll also provide that to the client as well. So they have the option of having the STL as well as the LYS file, which makes it a little bit more convenient for them, I think. So anyway, take a look at these parts here. This is a new character that we were pre-supporting for one of our clientele. This is for Digital Dark Pinups, and this is the Darth Talon character that's coming out this month. We were working on the legs and some other parts, and I was seeding all these parts onto RX2 after working on each part individually. And one of the things I noticed as I was trying to make some more space and I was reorienting some of the pieces was that when I did my proximity checks at their default angles, they were fine. But when I turned the leg, the way you just saw me turn that leg there, and then I reran proximity, doing nothing else, watch what happens. And this is the strangest thing. We now have 6 colliding supports. So a lot of you are probably going to go, well, you turned it. It changed the supports. Well, I didn't turn it in such a way that anything should have changed. In fact, the rotation that I pulled should not have modified any of the support location, tip, base, anything at all. It should have just turned the entire thing, raft included, for some reason. However, it moved the proximity. Now, I don't know if this is a mistake or if this is a bug or some sort of glitch, because I have encountered this on some occasions before, but it's never been something that really kind of stuck out to me the way it did this time when I was working on these files. And as I work through more of these files, you're going to see that each time I load another file, it either consistently gives me an issue or it doesn't. So it's not a consistent problem either, which even makes it more frustrating because it's something that's even harder to look for. And I'm not 100% sure why it's so complicated to find this issue and why I can't make it repeat itself every single time, but the fact that I can repeat it at all means that there's something going on there. So anyway, we're going to take a further look into this, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So when we fix the proximity here, I'm going to bring up another part so you can see what I mean, and then we'll kind of play around with a couple more different concepts here. Now, one of the other things that I found was that, let's say, for example, I'm working on a smaller printer that has a slightly smaller build plate, but a higher screen resolution entirely, which means it has a slightly higher accuracy level. So let's say, for example, I'm going from one really big printer that's 4K to a smaller printer that's also 4K. Those resolutions are going to be slightly different, and your accuracy levels are going to be slightly higher on the smaller screen because you have more pixels packed into a slightly smaller area. Therefore, I'm sure what's happening is there's some sort of difference in the detail level, and that is actually causing some of the problem when I switch from one printer to the other. So one of the issues we did find was when switching from the 4K or the Ultra or the DLP to the X2 printer to get use out of the bigger build plate. We would find additional islands and proximity problems just on initial load-in, nothing being modified, moved, or anything. But when we went back into the original file, loaded up the original printer profile, did the island searching, and did all the proximities, everything was the way that it was saved. So again, kind of scratched my head at it a little bit because it didn't really make full sense as to why this was changing things so much. But at the same time, I also kind of see where the change could be happening. The simple change from one device to the other as far as printers go really do show the difference between different printers and how you really need to be careful even if you are working with a pre-support file. It also kind of, in my opinion, shows you that STL files for pre-support really won't work as well because there's no way for you to take and modify those files once they're in your slicer. If all you have is an STL with a bunch of supports attached to it, Well, I mean, it's stuck the way it is. You're not moving any of those support rods around. They're stuck, they're static. That's it. That's all you've got. To me, that's not the greatest way to do a pre-support file, and that's one of the reasons why I like to both do the STL option and the Lychee Slicer scene file option, because it gives the client and the user more ability to edit the file that they have, which is already pre-supported. Now, again, some people will probably argue with me and say it's not necessary or it's just extra steps, but I still feel that having an editable file is far better than having something that is static and simply stuck in the way that however the person supported it before you. Because I know that there were a lot of files that I had in the past that were pre-supported STLs. I wish I had their authoring files because I would have made some slight changes and simply just used it the way it was. But instead, I wound up having to re-support the entire file. Now, as you see here with this arm, moving it and reorienting it and turning it actually caused 6 of these supports to cause collision issues. And again, I'm going to show you some more examples of this too towards the end where we actually bring all the parts back onto the plate. For now, though, we're just going to take a look at these different ones and all the different little tiny fun things that we'll find as we bring in our different parts and as we try to reorient them to make them fit on the build plate better. Now, I don't think this happens every single time with every single thing that I do, because there are several occasions where I've literally been able to just dump a bunch of files on a plate and I don't ever have these problems whatsoever. So this isn't a consistent issue, at least not recently. I'm sorry, at least not until recently, I should say. Previously, I never had this many proximity or issues like this where moving files around or anything like that would cause this many problems. So I'm wondering if this is just maybe issues with newer versions of the software versus older versions of the software, etc. Now, I'll bring the head in here, and I'm not going to move it at all. I'm actually going to leave it right where it sits, and then I'm going to show you this was supported, and here we go. We found one island that we did not find before, and now all I did was bring it into a different printer. I mean, the settings are slightly different, but the layer height is the same. So you really should not be finding any additional islands on here whatsoever. Now, I don't know if this is a bug. I don't know if this is something that is not intended, but this is something that I could consistently repeat a few times with a few different parts, where we did see that they were finding islands that we did not previously track before. And yeah, it was kind of frustrating because you're sitting here going, well, I already supported this. I already had my islands. I knew where all this was. And for some reason, it found new things. Now I'm going to turn the lower body, and then I'm going to bring in the arm and move everything up. And you'll see when we do the proximity check to everything as a group, we're going to have a couple parts here that have some new proximities that weren't there before. And I know they weren't there before because when I did these final checks in Lychee Slicer before I saved the files, I did the final checks myself. Literally wrote down on a sheet of paper, like, yes, checked, and checked it off. And I did this one at a time, very, very cautiously, to make sure that I was not screwing anything up here, and I was not, just being overzealous and not checking properly. So yeah, the oddity is that essentially what we've learned is when you work on a file, whether you change its orientation or not, when you bring it into a new printer, always check your islands and check your proximity. When you're changing orientation, if you're rotating the file, definitely recheck your proximity and your islands. Even go ahead and do your double checking. Do your high, your really high layer height and your really low layer height. Do it at both, and use the same trick that I taught you guys before with the island searching that way. So you're sure that what you're looking at is a good result. And obviously, with 3D printing, guys, there's no guarantees. We know that. But at the same time, the more we can work out these little bugs, the more we can figure out how to fix these little issues and these tiny little weird things that we run into all the time. I think the better off our prints are going to be in the long run, the better our results are going to be, the better our success rates are going to be. And oftentimes, it comes down to, would you rather your print succeed and have a little bit more supports on it, or would you rather have to deal with more print failures and really, really, really light supporting that you're just going to have to constantly adjust? I try to find somewhere in between the two where the supporting is not so heavy but not so light. And occasionally it winds up being a little bit heavier than I'd like it to be in some cases, and the clippers have to come out. But for the most part, we do try to make it relatively simple and less damaging with our support system. But as you can see here, reorienting all those parts did create some proximity problems, except for some of the parts that we've already worked on. Now the head, we addressed that one already. The upper and lower body there seem to be a little messed up. And, the arms look okay. Everything else seems fine. But, if you would have just thrown these parts in and gone, I already checked all the islands, I already checked all the proximity, and then slice, you would have had problems. And I'm pretty sure I've done that before. And it kind of makes me feel better because now I'm understanding a little bit more as to where maybe we had those mistakes. Maybe it wasn't my mistake. Maybe it was simply something that we weren't looking at when we addressed it on a new system. Again, these are things that I'm learning. I've never really run into this problem very frequently. So, again, I wanted to bring this one up. I wanted to point this out. If anybody's ever had this issue before, now maybe you have a little light in the dark. So I hope that this helped bring a little bit of education to anybody who's trying to figure out this particular problem. Now, if anybody's interested, we are actually becoming a member of the Lychee Slicer Ambassador Program. We will make the official announcement. This is not the official announcement. We're just telling you about it because we're excited about it. We just started talking to the folks over at Mango about the Lychee Slicer Ambassador Program. We're super stoked to be a part of it. It's a great group. Y'all are a great group. Y'all have helped support this channel and help it grow over the last year almost. And I'm super happy to see the community get as big and as active as it has been. Thank you so much again, as always, for watching. I hope that this episode was educational and useful for you, as always, in your 3D printing journeys. And I hope to see you all again real soon. Take care, everyone.